Hi, I'm Sarah with Designs by Sarah J. I am so excited to be bringing you this video tutorial about how to make the Heroic Hearts Tote Bag with my friends at Marcus Fabrics. So I had this idea as I was sitting home, like so many of you, working on masks. While I'm thrilled to be making masks for family and friends, I kept thinking that I wanted to do something more. There are so many heroes in our country right now. The frontline medical workers that are caring for sick patients, the teachers who are trying to keep education going for our students, all those workers at stores that are keeping us fed and in supplies, and countless other people who really are everyday heroes. And as I've heard stories, I thought one thing that quilters could do was create a tote bag and fill it with items that we can present to our heroes to recognize them and thank them for their efforts. So working with Marcus Fabrics, I've created the Heroic Hearts Tote Bag, and I'm here to tell you how to make this bag. The whole focus is this 6-inch heart block, and I'm going to walk you through just how to make it and then how to make your own tote bag. We have hashtags that we would love for you to share as you make your own tote bag so we can see the heroes that you're celebrating. We want to help build a community of all the heroes out in our society right now and help you reconnect with your fellow quilters and with your favorite quilt store. So be sure to check out the Marcus Fabrics webpage. This is a free pattern download on my website, Designs by Sarah J. You can go there and see how you can access the pattern for free. And then be sure to share your photos using the hashtags. As I mentioned, we want to see your heroes. We want to hear their stories. And we want to help celebrate everyone that's working in our communities to keep America going while we get through this new scenario. Thank you so much for joining me. Let's get started. Okay, first let's talk a little bit about fabric selection for your Heroic Hearts tote. You can make this with any type of fabric that you like. I'm going to show you what I picked for this version that I'm doing. You can see that there's a main print that kind of ties everything together, and then 4 other fabrics and a lining fabric. And so how I set this one up, I'm using this large scale multi-floral from my UR fabric line from Marcus Fabrics for my main print, and then for my heart I'll be using a pink and a purple that coordinate. I've got this light gray floral that's going to be my background for the heart in the frame, and then for my lining I'm going to use this pretty yellow. It's just a little light floral. I think for the inside sometimes it's nice to have a lighter print so you can actually see what's in the bag. Now for your prints, there's a swatch sheet in the pattern, and you can just cut a little square of fabric and lay it on top of these so you know what's fabric 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 as you're referring to the pattern. That keeps things really easy. So I'm going to iron and prep my fabrics, and then we'll start talking about sewing. Okay, I've cut the pieces for the interior of the heart, and I've sewn the background to this rectangle, and now I'm ready to add the next strip. And one of the things you'll notice is that the edges of the fabric don't line up, and that's okay because you're going to square this heart up when you're all done piecing. But for this next step, turn that strip over on top of your piece strip and make sure you align the bottom edge. You want to make sure that that's where you're aligning. You can see that the top, there's going to be a little gap on the background. Don't worry about that because it's all going to work out when we add the triangles. But I did want to point that out because that is a little unusual. If you're used to doing patchwork, you expect everything to line up neatly at this step. And this is deliberate, so you haven't done anything wrong. I'll go ahead and sew these, and then we'll talk about adding the triangles. So we have the interior of the heart piece, and I wanted to show you how to line up your ruler because this first cut that you make is critical to keeping the heart points and having everything get off to a good start. You'll see I've laid the 6.5-inch square on top of the piece block, and my 3 1/4 line is right here, so right to the left of the 3-inch, and you want to line up that 3 1/4 mark with the center of the block. So find the center point here, and then you want to align the diagonal mark on the ruler parallel to one of your seam lines so that you're going to keep everything nice and straight. So I have the 3 1/4 line here. It's just above the point of the block. I can see where the 1/4 inch lines at the top of the ruler are just above the points here, and that means I'm going to keep nice sharp points at the top. So I've got the 1/4 inch lines there. I've got a nice parallel line to the seam, and I've got the 3 1/4, and it looks like everything's lined up nicely. And so I'm just going to trim off over here on the right hand side that purple. I'm going to trim across the top, and then I'm going to snip here. And that's going to give me a nice shape where I'm ready to add my triangles. And don't worry, we will trim all of this up in the end. We've allowed for these triangles that go on now at the background to be a little bigger than you need, so you can trim to a perfect 6 1/2 inch finished block. So I'm going to go ahead and add the triangles, and then we'll be... Okay, I wanted to show you a couple of tips about adding these background triangles, because this is a little different than the way I'm used to piecing. And again, we cut these oversized, so you've got plenty of wiggle room to ultimately trim up your block. You'll notice that the overhang of the triangles on both sides of the pieced unit is a little larger than you're used to. That's totally normal. It's going to let you keep your heart points nice and sharp. And so line that up so that you've got the same amount of overhang on both sides. And now I'm going to press this. And for ease of keeping everything flat, I'm just pressing in the way it wants to fall, which is toward the background for me on this one. And I'm going to show you here on the mat. So right now it looks pretty wonky, but don't worry. We'll take our 6 1/2 inch ruler and lay it on there. And I'm going to try to make sure that I've got a good 6 1/2 inch amount on all the sides. I've got room to trim something everywhere. I'm going to end up with a nice sharp point. And so I'm just going to go ahead and start trimming off that excess. And to be safe, I'm going to rotate the mat so I'm not cutting toward myself. Trim that off. We'll rotate one more time here. And here we go. We've got a perfectly pieced 6 1/2 inch block. So now we're ready to add this in to the rest of our tote bag. I'll show you about adding the triangles next, but this is where you should be now, 6 1/2 inches, nice points all the way around, and we're ready to go. Okay, you can see now that I've added the fabric 1 triangles to all 4 sides of my pieced heart. And again, you can see how we have some dog ears sticking out, and this is obviously larger than we need to be. And you can see in the pattern instructions it tells you that we're going to trim this down to 9 inches at this point. And so our key point on the ruler that I'm going to want to find is the 8 3/4 mark, or the 1/4 inch up here, because I'm going to want to make sure that I'm not trimming off into the background anywhere. So I'm going to want to make sure that the 9 inch line that I'm cutting preserves the points of my block. So I've got a 1/4 inch there. I'm at a 1/4 inch on this side. Looks like the 9 is extending a 1/4 inch, and I'm good here. So I'm going to go ahead and trim the first 2 sides. Then I can rotate the mat again, pick this up, and now I can just lay the 9 inch mark on the edge I just trimmed because I verified. And then I will do a quick visual again, make sure that I'm good there. I'm nice and straight. I'm going to go ahead and trim this off. And now I have a framed heart. So I'm ready to add the next frame, and then we'll be ready for the borders. And after that, we'll start building the tote. Okay, we're back now, and we're going to start building the tote bag. You can see we have the framed heart block. I added the other round of triangles and the 2 borders. And now I'm going to take that front, and I've got my tote back here laying right side up, and I'm going to layer those together so the 2 right sides are together. Line up the edges so everything's nice and square. And then I'm going to pin around this, because I like to make sure that it's easy to keep the edges aligned. So I'm going to pin all the way around. And then I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and I'm going to stitch the pinned edges. So the side, the bottom, and the other side. And I'll use 1/4 inch seam, and I'll make sure I start and stop at the top edges and reverse a little bit on both, just to make sure that's a nice secure seam. I'm going to finish pinning here. Then I'll take this to the sewing machine and stitch that. And then I'll show you the next step about folding down the top edge so that that's clear. Because when I started on this, that was one of the things I had a question about. So let's get that stitched and then I'll show you the next step. So you'll see on the pattern that step 8 on page 3 says to turn the top edge of the tote to the inside and press well. And what that means is right now we've got the wrong side of the fabric here, and what will be the outer part of our tote is on the inside right now. So we're going to turn down 3/4 of an inch so that we get a nice crisp edge for what will ultimately be the outside part of our tote. And it wants a 3/4 inch allowance here, so I'm going to just use the ruler to identify where 3/4 of an inch is, and I might drop a pin in there just to help hold that. And then I'll come over to the other side again, find 3/4 of an inch. Got that. And then I can take the iron and go ahead and hit that. And I want to get a nice crisp seam there. I'll move the pin and then turn it over. And it will have naturally fallen at the right place because I turned it from the other side first. And so there we are. So now we're going to have a nice crisp edge for when we assemble the tote. You'll do that for the lining as well. And we can go ahead and talk next about how to box the corner. Okay, we've sewn the 3 sides of the front and the back together, and you'll see that the directions next tell you to press the seam allowance open. And the easiest way I found to do that is to pull the back of the tote a little bit towards me, and then take my iron, hold that seam allowance open, and press it. Careful not to burn your fingers, but as you can see, I just kind of keep pulling the back a little bit towards me. That gives me a little room to work with, and then I can get all the way down there into the corner and press that open. And you'll see when we go to do the corner that this is an important step, so don't think about skipping it. Go ahead and press all of those seams open, and then we'll make the lining and we'll be ready to start assembly. Alright, checking in again, we've now cut the 2 squares for the lining material, and just like we did for the front and back of the tote, we're going to layer the 2 squares right sides together, and then we're going to pin along 2 edges and the bottom, and we're going to stitch all the way around, leaving the top unstitched. I'll probably do a little stitch in reverse at the beginning of the seam on this end, and then again over here, just to make that extra secure. I'll stitch with a 1/4 inch seam and then press that open, and then we really will be ready to start some assembly. Okay, I want to take some time now to talk to you about boxing the corners on your tote bag. This is the step that really elevates your bag to looking professional. And when I first read the directions, I thought I need a little visual for this. So I'm excited to show you my steps of how I got great boxed corners. We're going to move back over to the cutting table so I can show you just how to line it all up, stitch it, and get a professional looking tote bag. Let's go. So we're ready to box the corner, and I mentioned this is really how your tote will end up looking very professional. And when I saw the written directions on step 9, I was a little confused because I really had never done this technique before, but it's super easy. So to start, you need to create that triangle that you see on step 9 on the graphic. And to do that, you're going to grab the front and the back of the tote and just pull them apart so that you've created a triangle shape. And this is where those open seams come in really critically, because now you're going to want to take a straight pin and you're going to drop it right through that seam line and line it up on the back so that you have got the seam coming together. And I like to just pull a pin straight down through there, and then I like to grab clover fork pins. Those are little pins that have points or prongs on each side, and I'm going to drop that in here on either side of my anchoring pin, and then I can pull that out and I can flatten this back out. And now I'm going to lay this on my rotary mat, and I want to measure down 1.5 inches from the point. And this is important that I get an accurate 1.5 inches on each corner so that I have a nice straight flat bottom. And so there's my 1.5 inch mark, so I'm going to mark that. That's where that is. And then I'm going to line up the 45-degree angle of the ruler. Make sure that I'm going to be drawing a straight line here. I've got the 45-degree mark, and I'm going to line that up. And yes, I've got my 1.5 inch mark, and I'm going to mark that on the other side of the seam allowance. Then I'm just going to take my ruler straight edge and I'm going to draw a light line there, and that's going to be my stitch line. So I can stitch on that, and I've already done that on this other edge, so you can see I've stitched right on that drawn line, and I did go back over that twice just so I could really reinforce this corner. And then I'm going to lay this on my mat, take my rotary ruler, and I'm going to trim to the right side of that stitch seam line, just snipping off this extra that would be bulk in the seam. Make sure that you're trimming this extra off. Don't trim into your tote. Lay the 1/4 inch line on your stitch line and then just snip that off. And look at this. You've now got a boxed corner. So we can go ahead and do the other side here, stitch that and trim, and do the same thing on your lining. And then we are finally ready to do the last assembly steps. We're getting really close now. It's time to make the handles. And to do that, we're going to take one of the strips. Now these are 20-inch long handles, so they'll be about a 10-inch drop after you've attached these. It's designed so that this is a sturdy tote. Of course, if you would like a longer handle, you're welcome to do that and adapt with what fabric you have on hand. So we're first folding it in half and getting a nice crease, and then we're going to fold each edge into that crease and press again. And once again, this is a way for us to get a nice finish edge on the fabric strip, so we don't have any raw edge or fray in the finished product. And so we'll fold again here, folding into the center line that we pressed. And give that a nice steam press there. And then the last step is to fold this in half one more time and press. And then we'll be able to come back through and do a line of stitching right near the edge here to secure it. And then the handles are going to be ready to add on to our tote bag. So we are almost there. Okay, we have now stitched our handles. I stitched a line of stitching just 1/8 inch or so from each edge, just to make that a nice professional looking handle. And now we're ready to mark to add it to the tote bag. And to do that, I've laid out the lining of the bag, and I'm going to measure 5 inches in from each side and just make a little mark. And then here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we're going to make a little mark. And then we will pin these straps with the outer edge of the strap against that 5-inch mark. And I'm going to pin that. And I've lined up the bottom of the strap with that folded down corner. And then I'm going to pin over here as well. And then I'm going to turn this over and do the same thing on the other side of the lining. So we'll have a handle on both sides. And so mark 5 inches in. And we can see kind of where that is from if we just straighten up our other strap there. And pin this. And then we're going to sew the straps onto the lining using an X shape, as you can see illustrated in the pattern, because we want to make sure the straps are nice and secure. So once you've got those pinned, go ahead and take this over to your sewing machine, and we'll sew the strap around in a square and then in an X shape to secure that, and then we'll show how we put the lining into the tote bag, and we'll be all done. Okay, we've stitched the handles to the lining of the bag, and now we're going to turn the outside of the bag inside out so we can see all of our work. And here's those box corners I told you about. Look how nice that looks to actually have a squared off corner. And now we're going to insert the lining into the bag here and line up the seam allowance, the seam line there on each side. And I'm going to use that fork pin that I talked about to make sure I've got the two side seams lined up as a starting point here. And then kind of shake the bag out, and here you can see I've got the lining on the inside, and now I'm going to make sure my handles are pulled out, and I'm going to pin along this top edge so I can now come through and do a couple of lines of stitching along the top so that I secure the lining to the bottom of the bag, and then we'll be ready for our big reveal. So I like to pin a lot just so there's no wobble, so pin all the way across here. And as you can see, the bag's popular with my friend Nora the quilt cat. She always likes to make an appearance in my videos, so here we go with her giving you a little preview of how much she's gonna like the bag. And we'll do this last stitching, and then I'll show you the finished product. So hello again, and as promised, here's the big reveal, the Heroic Hearts Tote Bag. Handles are on, we're ready to go. I'm going to fill it up and decide which hero in my community is going to get this one. I hope you're going to join me on this journey of making bags to celebrate all the heroes. Be sure to use the hashtags because I really want to know what heroes in your community you're celebrating. If you have any questions at all, contact me on social media. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and my email address is on my website, designsbysarahj.com. I'm really excited about celebrating some folks, and I can't wait to see what bags you make and who your heroes are. So contact me, and let's go get started making some Heroic Hearts tote bags. Thank you.